Hi guys, Jackie with Famished Farm. I am outside today. It's probably about 55. I think it's going to get up to about 58, just under 60. But there's a good chance of rain. And I was hoping to get out here and till the garden plot this morning before rain comes in, potential rain. And it's kind of unfortunate because we have just beautiful 60-degree weather coming up, which would be perfect to be out here working. Unfortunately, it's going to be too wet. But the plan is, or the plan was, like I said, to get out here and get this done. But what I discovered was not good. The previous owners had a swimming pool, and we always assumed it was, a 14 or maybe an 18-foot swimming pool, and a couple inches of sand put down over the Bermuda to make a pad for the pool. But what I discovered is there's landscape fabric way down, like 6 inches down, sand on top of it, and then in some places toward the edges of the garden, clay mixed in. So it's just a huge mess. And what we've kind of made a plan to do is to peel back the landscape fabric, and it goes about maybe 3 or 4 feet into the new garden bed. So we're gonna dig out the sand at the edges, cut back the landscape fabric to the edge of the garden, and then till it. Put the tarps on and be done with it. The plan for the spring is to pull up the rest of the landscape fabric where the pool was and then just reseed. So that's what we're hoping to get done. I thought this was going to be a, super easy project. The tilling would take half an hour. We're doing like a 14 or 15 feet by 25 feet roughly. So it's not a huge space. It's just, this complicates it a little bit. And for 2 old people, it really complicates it. So we're gonna get to work though and get this done, hopefully today. Hopefully before it rains. Wish us luck. So this is at the edge of the garden. You can tell the sand is right at the surface. This is inside the garden bed, and you can tell I'm digging here and not coming to really sand. Here I've got to go a bit further. Finally, after about 3 inches down, I do find the sand, and I just keep enlarging the hole. Here's the liner. You can see the landscape fabric, if you will, down at the bottom. And now I'm just going to enlarge this hole, and I think I end up actually moving spots to try to find the edge of the landscape fabric. So I'm going to repeat this whole process in 4 different spots into the new garden bed that is the area that we need to remove this landscape fabric so I can till. And once I've found that, I decide to take a break for lunch, and we come back to it after lunch. We get the tiller ready to go. We're going to put gas in it, but there's about a half tank of gas in it, so we'll skip that. And once we're back out at the garden, I can show you these are the 4 spots that we know we've identified kind of the arc that the landscape fabric is lying. So we bring in the tiller, we adjust the depth on it to keep it about 6 inches, and then we start just at the edge of the new garden plot. So we're on the north end, working our way south, and I'm aiming right down to that white pole. The plan at the start of the day was basically to till this whole garden plot, but by this point we're just realizing this is going to be much more involved than we thought. So my new revised goal is to till in down to about where I'm at right now, which is breaking new ground,
And this is Bermuda grass, so we're just trying to get this root system out of here. And then in between where each of my raised beds, I want to do that little walkway that was, I put cardboard over it, but the Bermuda grass was very persistent even in those places. So that's kind of the ultimate goal for the day. We do end up having to we do the best we can given the time we've got. And this ended up taking almost 3 hours, and that included the part in the morning where I was digging the little test holes to see where we were going. So we're gonna kind of revert to just using shovels because I noticed that the landscape fabric was getting eaten up by the tines of the rototiller. So we're just starting here, and as we pull this, it does rip. So we kind of decide not to do that. So we're going to use our shovels more and try to work the soil loose enough that we can pick up the next section of landscape fabric and kind of fluff that soil up so it's easier to shovel off the landscape fabric. So that's kind of going to be our goal. And I decide that I'll do a trench along the line here down to the white pole and just cut the landscape fabric. So when we go to pull it, we'll at least be pulling in the garden plot. And so down here is about where we've got to the end. And now we're back to doing our slow process of removing the dirt. And I decide that maybe it'd be a good idea to run the tiller along this arc that I'm trying to show Rod here. And unfortunately, I forget that we have, well, first off, I decide I'd better move the foot of leaf mold we've got on top. And this is kind of a comedy of errors, guys, because as we get going, where we're going to hit these holes, the raised beds have logs in the bottom of them, and they're kind of smaller ones, but you know, your rototiller doesn't want to hit logs and it tends to walk over them. So we just kind of do the best we can, and Rod is here. He's going to be the one that pulls the logs out as he sees them. And I'm going to try to get it to back up and go in further. But, oh my goodness, it was, oh, there's a log. You can just see I kicked it up. So anyway, we eventually get our system down. And here we're loosening the soil on the top. You can see how matted it is there, and there may or may not have been a log right there too. Oh, yep. So once we get down to the landscape fabric, then you can see it gets a lot easier because you can lift that up and then loosen that soil, and that's, you can see what Rod's doing there. So that works out really well once we get to that point. But in the meantime, we're having to move branches and pieces of wood on where the raised beds were. So hindsight, you know, guys, 2020. But here we are. That's the last piece of landscape fabric that we need to pull out this morning. So we're happy to have accomplished that. You can tell my joy. And now we're just going to attempt to get into these walkways that were between the raised beds and get those tilled as best we can. And Rod is going to move down to the other end of the bed where you can see that there's a bunch of piles. That's mainly leaves that are outside the bed. So once he's done doing his project, he's looking for a bolt that came off the loopers. Once he's done doing that, he'll take the rake and start raking that leaf mold back into the garden bed. So here you can see a little better. We're still pulling some branches out, and this is not perfect by any stretch, but this is going to be basically what we accomplish today. Now I'm taking some of the loose soil that's outside of the garden bed and putting it back in. And when I say soil, this is really sand with a little bit of topsoil in it. And then I'm going to proceed to kind of spread out all of this leaf mold as best I can. And I use my feet, the rake, whatever works. I use the rake itself as a kind of a bucket to move this leaf mold around the bed. It all works. And at this point, I'm just looking to even this out as best as I can. Next year, I'm thinking about doing just 2 raised beds in this spot, but do them longer using the raised bed blocks I've already got. And so most of this soil, sand, leaves, branches will be raked into that bed when it gets formed. The bottom of the screen is where the first one will go, and then I'll leave an opening between them, and that's where the second one will go. So here I've got it spread out as much as I can. I open this tarp, and unfortunately it's supposed to be one 10 by 12 tarp, and it's 2 6-foot tarps, but it's okay, it works out. I'll use those logs that I pulled out from the raised beds and use those as weights for the tarp. I've also got all that wood over on the side there that came from the raised bed, so we'll use that too. And this is all of the landscape fabric that we pulled out. That'll go right into the garbage. Rod, in the meantime, cleaned up the tiller and put that away. We've got the rakes and the shovels put away too. And this is what it looks like. This is actually the next day after we have some rain. And you can see there are some low spots obviously on this, and we'll have to spend time grading this area better. But all in all, I accomplished my goal, which was to get this tilled. Now, I would like another tarp to go in this section too. That has never been tarped. It's always been an open bed, and I don't have enough tarp right now, but we'll add some before spring next year.